Welcome to the Dr. Jim Cares podcast with Dr. James Augustine, where we provide powerful solutions for helping you create wellness. The following discussion is for educational purposes only and is not meant to diagnose or treat disease. Because our approach is individualized, it's important to not apply this information without first consulting with your healthcare professional. And now, here's Dr. Jim.
Hey, welcome back to the Dr. Jim Cares podcast. My name is Dr. Augustine from Head to Wellness, and today I'm going to be talking about saturated fat and cholesterol. Perfect timing with Christmas and holiday times being here and the food that we're going to eat. So why does this really matter? First off, it's a big topic. Many people talk about it. But why does it matter is because of atherosclerosis. In other words, plaque in your arteries in your heart. Because as you know today, still the number one killer today is what? Heart disease. Plaquing is at the process or at the crucial side of this whole problem. And we just like to say that atherosclerosis is the most essential process in the development of heart disease. Kind of a big problem. And as you know, here are the culprits. What types of foods have saturated fat and cholesterol? Well, red meat, butter, eggs. We could say cheese as well. And of course, back in the day, saturated fat started to be evil or be the villain, and this is in the 1950s from a doctor. His name is Ansel Keys. His original research, his misguided interpretation of his research, has been sort of the standard in the American diet. And what did he say? And this is the conclusion even today. Your doctor, cardiologist will say this very thing, unless they're up on the current science, that eating saturated fat is bad and we're supposed to replace it with polyunsaturated fats. And yet, this has been done and known since the 1950s, and yet, still today, the number one killer in America is still heart disease. It's kind of a problem. So let's look at some other science. Here's a book. You can see that okay? This book is called, and I'm going to read it to you, The Cholesterol Myths. And it says, exposing the fallacy that saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease. And the doctor's name is U-F-F-E, Ravenskov, MD, PhD. Great research scientist. All the cholesterol research ever compiled, ever done, up until the year 2000. Here's the book. And basically the conclusion of this is there's no connection of cholesterol and saturated fat causing heart disease. Well, we're going to go in a little bit of a deeper dive today. And let's talk about current. JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, March 14th, 2022. You can look this up. And here's the title of it. Evaluating the association between low-density lipoprotein cholesterol reduction and relative and absolute effects of statin treatment, a systematic review and meta-analysis. And so here's the bottom line with this. I'm not going to read a bunch of research and bore you with that, put you to sleep, but a conclusive association between absolute reductions in LDL-C levels and individual clinical outcomes was not established. Meaning that LDL cholesterol reduction doesn't seem to make a difference in heart disease. And these findings underscore the importance of discussing absolute risk reductions when making informed clinical decisions with individual patients. So when you go to your doctor and sit down with him and he's wanting to prescribe a statin drug based on your lab findings, he should suggest, well, the statin drugs really don't make a difference in your development of heart disease. That being a problem. Therefore, I want you to be very informed. Conclusions of this within the research, basically people that have a family history of high cholesterol, so it's called familial hypercholesterolemia, sort of the genetic side of things, and who've never had a heart attack, yet are at high risk based on conventional blood lab markers, such as LDL levels. Statin drugs provide remarkably little benefit. And this is why. Because they actually appear to increase the ratio of pattern B to pattern A LDL cholesterol. So pattern B, just remember pattern B is bad. Pattern B are the small, dense particles of cholesterol that can wedge their way in between your endothelial cells that line your blood vessels. That's called endothelium, but that has the tendency to cause the problem is the pattern B. And there's something else that actually will raise your pattern B, which you don't want to do. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as well. So let's talk about blood work now. A basic lipid panel, lipid meaning blood fat panel, would be total cholesterol, HDL, which is supposed to be the good cholesterol. Remember that. HDL, good, LDL, bad, and then of course the ratios. So this is really what you want to see within your blood work. So your triglyceride to HDL ratio is a significant ratio. And what you want your triglycerides to be less than 100, your HDLs to be greater than 50. And so therefore you want your ratio to be 2 or less, which would therefore translate into and mean that you're insulin sensitive, which is what you want. Because maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Insulin resistance, 1 out of every 3 people today are insulin resistant, not sensitive. You do not want to be insulin resistant, which means that your insulin levels are too high and your body tissues are going, I don't see any insulin and I can't get the sugar inside my cells, so things are going wrong, and hence you're moving towards diabetes. So pre-diabetes, insulin resistance. What are the important blood work markers? Now, I would suggest that you actually write these down, or you just review this video again. And maybe I might put a PDF so that you can download this, so you can take this to your doctor and say, here, order these blood work markers. So the important ones, let's just say in a lipid panel, right, the cholesterol panel, make sure they include particle size. So they're looking at pattern A and pattern B. We want a fasting insulin, critical one. Because if your fasting insulin is too high, guess what? You're heading towards pre-diabetes and diabetes. If it's low, that's really where you want to be. Hemoglobin A1C. This is glycated glucose. Basically what it demonstrates is the last 3-month averages of your blood sugar. So that's a good thing. C-peptide. C-peptide is something that doctors typically don't test for, nor would they know to test for. But what it indicates is how well your pancreas is producing insulin. So what if your C-peptide's high? You're definitely moving in the wrong direction. You're heading right into diabetes. You could even be diabetic. What if it's low? Kind of what you want. You want it to be lower, C-peptide low. Another one, C-reactive protein, also known as CRP, and you want to have the high sensitivity, which it should say -HS, high sensitivity. That's a inflammatory marker that's really connected to causing heart attacks and strokes. You don't want those things to be high. C-reactive protein low. Homocysteine, very similarly, another inflammatory marker that is also connected to heart disease risk. So those are the ones that I would recommend minimally. There are others, but those are really, really solid. You really want to make sure that those are included in your blood work. So let's talk more about fasting insulin. So if you were to do a Google search, and you might want to type this in, do a Google search on fasting insulin, the interesting thing to note about it is it says even there, higher insulin levels are linked to insulin resistance and may increase the risk of heart disease, cancer, as well as Alzheimer's. Unsure if you've heard of this, but there's a thing that they like to call with Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, because you start developing amyloid plaques in your brain that have to do with high levels of insulin that create this other condition that's called advanced glycation end products. Therefore, I keep talking about insulin, so you might want to take note. You need your insulin as low as possible and always to stay low. Okay, just remember that. So the cholesterol equation has often focused on LDL being the bad cholesterol. However, LDL definitely serves important roles in your human physiology, including your immune system. LDL cholesterol is essential for your immune system. Brain function. Your brain is over 60% fat, and when you start to reduce your cholesterol, you can have brain fog and memory issues and things of that sort. Also, cellular metabolism. It's involved in the cell walls within your tissue cells. Steroid hormones, including estrogen, testosterone, and so much more. So LDL cholesterol is essential for your body physiology, as opposed to it being this bad, evil thing. So let's talk now about insulin sensitive people. That's what you want to be. This is the good thing, being insulin sensitive. You should have high HDL cholesterol, right? That's the good cholesterol. Whereas triglycerides to HDL ratio, you want that to be what? You want that to be low. And when you do these things, right, the correlation with LDL cholesterol levels, whatever your level is at, if you have those factors in place, then that's not so much associated with heart disease, which is great. In contrast, insulin resistant, the pre-diabetic people, individuals, they have high triglycerides and low HDL cholesterol. That ratio that we talked about, triglycerides to HDL as well, will be high, like 3 and above. And that definitely increases your risk towards heart disease. Now you combine that, right, with the HDL or the LDL levels, the supposedly bad cholesterol. So that combination, that pattern is going to be a bad thing that tends to push you towards cardiovascular risk. That's really what you want to know. And certainly it's important to consider an individual's overall health and not just cholesterol levels when determining risk for heart disease. Also important to consider these individual factors such as insulin sensitivity when you interpret, not you, but your doctor interprets your cholesterol levels. Bottom line with food, a ketogenic or carnivore diet does not raise your bad cholesterol with the bad particles, right? What are the bad particles? The LDL pattern B. So in summary, saturated fat and cholesterol foods are not bad for you and do not increase your risk for heart disease. What does increase your risk for heart disease is eating starch and sugar, which spikes insulin, but also including seed oils and vegetable oils in your diet. And guess what? They're in the midst of all of those processed foods. So just moving away from processed foods is going to be a benefit for you. Why? Because you want to keep your insulin down. Why? We talked about that earlier because it's such a big part of developing heart disease and the risk of heart disease. So food-wise, starch, sugar, and anything that spikes insulin, which would be those guys, and also seed and vegetable oils. Bad guys. Keep that down. Good blood work markers. Let's talk about that. Fasting insulin, C-peptide, a lipid panel, right, a cholesterol panel that would include LDL particle size, hemoglobin A1C, C-reactive protein, as well as homocysteine. Good markers to make sure that are in your blood work when you get them tested with your doctor. Now, let's talk about, again, what those blood work, interpreting your blood work a little bit. Insulin-resistant people, right? The bad thing you don't want to be insulin-resistant. Have low HDL, which is the good cholesterol, high triglycerides, and then a high triglyceride to HDL ratio, which means it's 3 or higher. Also high fasting insulin, high C-peptide, and LDL pattern B predominating. Bad things to happen. You are definitely heading your way towards heart disease risk. Now the flip side of this is insulin sensitive people should have high HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, low triglyceride to HDL ratio, basically a 2 or lower, low C-peptide, low fasting insulin. Got that? The major problem is what? High insulin, which comes with a plant-based diet. Have these blood work markers checked and see where you're at. Really, really important. So if you truly want to heal and overcome your health challenges, please contact me. I'd love to help you out. Please leave your questions or comments down below, or you can email me at draugustine@gmail.com. You can also reach out to my office at 562-860-3404. I'm also on social media, Instagram, TikTok, as well as YouTube. Please give me a follow there. That'd be great. I'm also on podcasts, Apple and Spotify podcasts, so please subscribe and give me a like there. My name is Dr. Augustine, again, from Head to Wellness. Thank you so much for watching, and we will definitely see you next week. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on your journey to wellness. Join us next time for more information and education about your health. And feel free to contact Dr. Jim on social media or at his office, Ahead to Wellness in Buena Park, California.